City, state, federal, issues that affect and change all of our lives. The Capitol with Tara Szczepanski.
Hi, I'm Tara Szczepanski, and today on Live One, I'm joined by Jason Goodman. How are you? I'm so excited we get to continue our conversation from the first time that I met you a couple weeks ago.
I'm so excited that you're still alive.
It's been an eventful couple of weeks. I said I was going to stay safe from the first experience with our local gangs of New York.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, for people who maybe haven't seen those previous videos, you were right back in the fray getting attacked. Now you're on their list. They've doxed you, put your picture in their database. I guess I'm in that database too. I haven't checked.
The CHUD database is
that
what they were
it is?
calling
What does that stand for?
I don't even know. That people were telling me about it. So
wow.
Yeah, the CHUD database. But the second time I had gone out to film the riots was on or these mostly peaceful riots, protests. It was Martin Luther King Day, and so everybody had assembled over
right.
the Barclays Center. And you know me, I go out and I live stream these events to bring just on the ground footage and for everybody to be listening to the speeches, to understand what's being said, whether you agree or disagree with the content of what's being said. Everybody's right is to protest,
yeah.
but for a peaceful protest. And the footage I'm bringing to you on the live ground is that these are not these peaceful protests as they've been marketed to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think I didn't get a chance to see as much footage from Barclay, but that did break out into a big fight. A lot of cops were injured. Certainly the first one that you were at, we had demonstrators coming down Fifth Avenue or wherever that was, wearing body armor with riot shields, helmets.
Saying death to America.
How is that a peaceful protest? That's a gang that is organized to terrorize people in the street. It's just the sight of that is going to frighten a normal person. So that's not the same as when you or I paint a sign that says, hey, you know, Constitution, we're for the Constitution. We don't want to be locked in our homes and have our businesses forcibly shut. That's a peaceful protest. Marching down the street demanding a revolution and overthrowing the government and, you know, having bludgeoning weapons and shooting chemicals at innocent young women, that's not a peaceful protest.
But since it's in the name of,
right.
of Black Lives Matter, it can go. And yeah, I guess if we were to name ISIS, you know, America is the best, then ISIS would be allowed to operate too in America.
There's a really strange thing going on right now where facts aren't considered. You know, we have affidavits from people, and I have to be careful how I speak right now because there's things that I can say that will get this taken off of YouTube or wherever you might post it because they just won't allow debate. So it is a fact that there are people who have given sworn affidavits in which they claim they observed election fraud. None of those affidavits have been properly tested in a court of law through the adversarial process. They were just all denied, and you know, news, I don't even know what I want to call them, but people who are on corporate-owned news tell us that that is proof that there is no evidence. But this is not the way the law works. This is not the way court proceedings work. There was just this shout down of anything Donald Trump or his defenders would present, and now we're in this world where if you supported Donald Trump, they are openly calling for you to be re-educated.
The re-education programs or camps or
for people to not, you know, buy your products in the case of Mike Lindell, for your customers to abandon you. We've heard Deutsche Bank is no longer working with Donald Trump, and it's not enough for the enemies of Donald Trump to defeat him in an election, which is the way we're supposed to have this peaceful transfer of power. They now want to impeach him again, even though he's no longer president, convict him to prevent him from running for public office ever again. There's talk of criminal charges. I mean, this is so ginned up. It's absolutely absurd. We've heard comparatively little about this guy, John Sullivan, who was arrested by the FBI and then released.
Mm-hmm.
Twitter has taken down his real Jaden X Twitter account. But weeks after they took out the President of the United States, and you know, Tara, you and I were talking about this before we started, the situation with Twitter, silencing, forget about Donald Trump, silencing the President of the United States over what they perceive as a call to violence or whatever it is. You know, Trump didn't say go to the Capitol and break in there and kill somebody. That would be an obvious, you know, something's wrong with the guy, we got to take it off. But we have Antifa Twitter handles, we have this John Sullivan guy who's on there with the video inciting people to climb the walls, inciting people to go through doors, to, you know, burn this. He's saying that sort of thing. And the guy is there, he's at the tip of the spear of this faux insurrection or whatever it was that happened. He captured the most viewed video of Ashley Babbitt being shot in the neck, the Air Force veteran. What we've heard less about is that Sullivan's own adoptive father is a retired Air Force general who retired in disgrace after being reprimanded for mishandling the transfer of some nuclear warheads to Taiwan. So my question becomes, what is going on with the Air Force? That's a remarkable coincidence that he would be right there when this woman is shot. How come we don't know the name of the officer who shot her? I think right away when George Floyd was killed, we knew the names of all the officers who were involved. The other thing that's very interesting is, you know, Brandon Straka, who you and I were speaking about earlier, he's now been arrested by the FBI. There's a lot of people who have done a lot of violence. What happened to the people who attacked you? Have any of them been arrested?
They haven't been arrested yet. I do have assault charges that are out there for 3 of them, one including felony assault, the one that hit me with the skateboard from the January 10th incident that happened in Madison Park. But no, they haven't been arrested yet. And then one of them has their full face out there. And though I was looking for them when I went out to the Martin Luther King to see if I could see that. So during that day, I did, because I was recognized early on from being there and streaming, I did walk by the officers, and the officers did offer like more. I don't know how to describe. Like I felt
they were much more helpful.
Yeah,
the
they were
second
helpful.
day.
They were helpful.
So Brandon Straka, he's been arrested and incarcerated. Have any of the people who attacked you been arrested? Do you know?
They haven't been arrested, and so what happened to me on January 10th, and I was just streaming, and they came up and they basically I saw them harassing the media, and being a reporter, an independent reporter that was there, I refused to turn off my live stream, and they don't like having their, you know, it's a public space, and First Amendment freedom of the press, and also coupled with a public space, I'm allowed to stream, and so they don't like that. So actually, they're violating my rights to be providing press there.
Right.
And but yeah, so the individuals who had attacked me on that day have not been brought to justice or caught. Yet we have a nationwide effort by the FBI as if they've suddenly been engaged to full force. To when I was back in Florida the past couple of days, I see billboards all over the place telling people to report people from the Capitol riots, as if we're asking people to inform on their neighbors. And Brennan Starka was actually turned in by a relative of his.
Whoa, wow, I did not know that. Wow. Well, I mean, you know, see, it's interesting, and you've had this happen, I've had this happen. They don't want us video recording them because they know they're going to be involved in violence later, and they don't want the FBI or individual citizens to be able to sift through hours of video and identify them. This is one of the things that's being done with John Sullivan. He's being identified at these Antifa and pro-anarchy and pro-BLM and Marxist riots and organizing riots. There was one in Provo, Utah, that he was arrested.
Sullivan was involved with that one, and also charged for the riots that happened and resulted in deaths in the Provo, Utah.
So why is this guy allowed out? And we've got, you know, the grand poobah of QAnon shaman Water Buffalo Lodge or whatever with the David Lee Roth face paint. He's asking for organic food in jail, and they're giving it to him. I mean, I've spoken to several people who have been to jail. I think it's famous for having terrible food. It's not a restaurant, and it's not your vacation. And the fact that they even told us that that was a request from this guy and granted it is so absurd to me. I just can't begin to understand it. But they've just moved past the events of January 6th at the Capitol building with this foregone conclusion that Donald Trump incited a riot. He's got to be criminally charged for that. Everybody who is involved, they don't want to actually investigate. And this is the same exact model as the Russiagate. Russia hacked the election. For 4 years, we heard about how Russia hacked this election, but somehow magically in 2020, no, this election is impervious to interference. There's no way that anybody could have manipulated the results of this election, and we're not even willing to investigate it.
And they've had hours and hours of testimony from hundreds of people signing sworn affidavits, and that won't be heard.
I mean, in my view, Tara, the presidential election is a very unique thing, and there should be special laws for dealing with it. It's different than an assault or a robbery or a breach of contract. It's a unique thing that the average citizen doesn't get involved in. To the extent that if one of the two participants in that contest even says, I think there was election fraud, that should be sufficient to trigger a federal investigation. He shouldn't have to go to a federal court and hire his own lawyer and act as this sort of pseudo-civilian to sort it out. The fact that the President of the United States said, hey, look, there's election fraud, we need to investigate this, rather than saying, okay, you know what, I lost, I'm not going to make a big deal out of this and walk away. That's happened in almost every other election. There should be a provision that if one or the other candidate has a legitimate or even just raises it, that they investigate it. But there was, from the beginning, such a strenuous effort to just not even entertain that possibility. It's absurd. Joe Biden, when I went to the inauguration, the city was empty. Washington, D.C. was totally empty. Obviously, no one was allowed to go there. And many people say, well, nobody showed up because people weren't allowed to go.
There were more people greeting the president back in Palm Beach, where I was, to greet him, down all the way to Mar-a-Lago.
And if they had said you're not allowed to go there, I'm thinking recently in Times Square on New Year's Eve, they announced that it was closed. But when I went there to try it, I figured I'll go sort of say, hey, I'm pressed, can you let me in? I'm by myself. And I thought they might let me in. I was wrong. But the point is, every street surrounding Times Square, and I was only approaching from the west side, I'm sure it was similar on the east side, was jammed with thousands of people wanting to go in there. And we did not see thousands and thousands of people jammed wanting to find a spot to go see Joe Biden. It was just empty because nobody cared. The guy didn't campaign. Nobody came to his rallies. He has 20,000 Twitter followers to Trump's 80,000 Twitter followers.
80 million.
80 million, right, sorry. When he does a live stream, sometimes Joe Biden is getting less viewers on a live stream than you are, or I am. So this is all very strange.
I was watching the on the White House YouTube page, and you can see the ratio of thumbs up to thumbs down and how that changed after the live stream ended.
Right. I mean, so is it that Trump supporters are now ganging up to troll Joe Biden, or is there just not a lot of support for Joe Biden once you leave New York, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., these cities that control media? You know, the television stations are always located in the big cities, which are controlled by Democrat governors. We've got our governor here in New York with his edicts, and he says, oh, you got to wear a mask, you got to take the vaccine, you got to do all this kind of stuff. Meanwhile, he's not doing any of that stuff. Has Cuomo gotten the vaccine yet?
Didn't he say something about how ethnic minorities should be the first
to
have the vaccine? Like, excuse me, I'm not a guinea pig.
Right. I mean, the thing that's so strange is this vaccine. I had a conversation with Alan Dershowitz on my show on Crowdsource the Truth, and I'm learning a lot about how lawyers think and what they do. And that's not to suggest that I think that I'm a lawyer, but I've had these times in my life where I've dealt with engineers and developing things, and you get a good sense for how engineers think. I've dealt with doctors, and you can get a sense for how they think, and lawyers. So with Dershowitz, when we started the conversation, I said to him, I want to just start out by establishing some terms. Because if I tell you, well, this is a vaccine, but it's actually a glass of gasoline, and you drink it, but I said, well, that's a vaccine. I mean, I don't know what happened to you, but that's a vaccine. You can't call an elephant a vaccine and inject it into someone. We need to have an understanding of what these terms are. So I read to Mr. Dershowitz the definition of a vaccine from the CDC's website, something to the effect of a medical treatment that stimulates the immune system to inoculate a person, preventing them from getting and spreading a disease. Dershowitz said, no, I don't believe that. So I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, this is the CDC, this is what they say it is. But what I've realized since that conversation is that he wants to apply existing laws and understanding that apply to vaccines to this thing, whatever it may be, by calling it a vaccine. Now, this is a legal tactic where they're always doing this. I refer to it as lawfare, which is the use of the law as a weapon. Now, it's being done to Brandon. Now, whether he did or didn't penetrate the Capitol building, it's being done to Donald Trump as well. They've got him now. They've arrested him on the pretext of you did X, Y, and Z. You said this, you said that, you're in a video here doing this or that. This is the evidence they're going to present. Now, perhaps Brandon will be able to defend himself and exonerate himself, but I got to imagine he's going through a very unpleasant set of circumstances now, probably in some, at least a room, isolated, not able to leave and do whatever he wants, if not an actual jail cell where he could be hurt by other people, harassed, intimidated, bad food, bad sleeping conditions, exposed to other people who could have any number of diseases, not to mention getting beaten up. And he's going to be spending a lot of money and a lot of time in court. This is going to really damage his will, his enthusiasm. I mean, this is what they want to do.
That's what they want.
Break his enthusiasm.
Because he was able to garner so much support for
Correct.
a movement
Correct.
of walk away, which I'm a walk away, being a Democrat that then got
Right.
red pilled once I did my own independent research. And really that's all it takes. Once you can see the discrepancies of what's being presented versus what's actually happening, you start to question everything and your mind doesn't shut off from questioning.
Right.
And so he was part of this, he's the founder of this movement. So I believe he was targeted for it because what's a very concerning aspect is that I read through the criminal complaint that was filed against him, and he didn't go inside of the Capitol. He was near its doors, but he never entered inside of the Capitol. So they're charging him for being on the grounds, on federal grounds. Which how far is this then going to go?
Right.
Because you had basically a lot of Trump supporters that were present in the Capitol, and who's to say, all right, is it going to stretch down all the way to Pennsylvania? Because the amount of supporters that were there was stretching all the way down.
And I think the sidewalk is federal property. So being in Washington, D.C., are you suddenly now subject to arrest if you were there on that day? But I think you're right. They are targeting him for several reasons, because Brandon was extremely effective, but I think he was very scary to them because Brandon was bridging an important gap. Conservatives traditionally have totally rejected homosexuality, but Brandon was creating a bridge to, I think, a new generation of conservative that supports the notion of freedom of sexuality. And Brandon was able to also, I think, speak not only to conservatives, but to liberals in the LGBTQ community who someone like Donald Trump or someone like me or perhaps even you can't reach, in the same way that black conservatives can speak to the black community in a way that many people in these communities just won't listen to someone who's not part of their community. So Brandon was really breaking through an important barrier, and I absolutely agree that they targeted him. They're going to give him a very hard time, and I'm actually very concerned about what may happen to Brandon.
Is he becomes more of a danger to what they would label as a danger because he steps outside of the narrative that they're trying to construct. I know when I became vocal as a conservative and a Trump supporter, people would be telling me that oh, you're a woman, you must hate yourself, or oh, you're a woman of color. That's my mere existence of being outside of this narrative that they're trying to make people believe and condition to believe, we threaten that.
Yeah.
And so that's what Brandon, his existence is doing.
Well, and it's interesting too how when you arrive at these pro-anarchy events that are about diversity and accepting all sexualities and races and nationalities and all that, they're calling you a Nazi, they're calling you a white supremacist, but of course, you don't fit the traditional mold of a white person, and if you were on their side, then they would consider you a woman of color. But because, for whatever esoteric reason, they don't like you, you're outside of that and you're just a Nazi.
So they've invented new words for that. So we've got is that multiracial whiteness is the new phrase that I feel.
Wow.
It was either maybe the Washington Examiner. I'm not sure where I saw the article, but they were calling it multiracial whiteness. And so that's the new phrase that's been invented now to describe those who they are saying you're a white supremacist, but you're obviously not a white person. So we just invent stuff these days that will then fit the liberal agenda.
But this is what they're constantly doing. In other words, they say, well, you know, Brandon didn't go into the building. Donald Trump didn't say go over there and attack the Capitol. But they tell you that that's what happened. They tell you that Donald Trump, you know, incited an insurrection and he incited violence, so he's got to be taken off of Twitter. He's got to be removed from the presidency. Got to be impeached again. Got to be convicted. Can't have any bank accounts. Can't have any business. Nobody can buy anything Trump. It's very scary. I was telling you just before that I've received a letter from my apartment building saying that there have been this list of complaints against me for entering the apartment building without wearing a mask. And they've got dates, they've got times. So where did you get these? Who's making these complaints? Where's the evidence that I did this? This is America. I have the right to face my accusers. You can't just make things up. But that's actually not the case anymore. They can and have made these things up. They've threatened me with a monetary fine. I was never given any instruction that that was going to happen, or what is that, $5? 5 million? What is the monetary fine? Who determines it? And why are they allowed to do that? And the real danger is, what this is doing is, it's galvanizing the will of these ignorant people around New York City, including my neighbors in my apartment building, who are so frightened by this obviously illogical narrative that they just believe what they're being told. And so they report me to the apartment building. Now, if I don't comply with the apartment building, I guess the next step is that they call the police and the police remove me as some kind of health threat. But I hope there are people watching us right now, Tara, who think that we're conspiracy theorists and what we're saying doesn't make any sense, because I want them to do this little logical test for themselves. We're now 11 months into this pandemic, 10 months, 11 months. So if you cut yourself and you got an infection and you went to the doctor and you said, this is pretty bad, I washed it, but it's getting infected, and the doctor said, here's some cream, put that on there. If after 11 months of seeing that doctor and putting the same cream on there, your arm was all swollen and it was getting worse and this infection was just clearly getting worse, and the doctor said, you need more cream, keep putting the cream on there, it's obviously illogical to any person. You don't need a degree in medicine to know that if you are doing the same thing for 11 months and the problem is getting worse, you need to reevaluate your approach and come up with a different solution. So if everybody walking around with masks on, staying in their homes, closing their businesses, eating in restaurants in plastic tents outside in the cold, which is totally absurd, if that is resulting in an increase in coronavirus infections, why would we continue doing that rather than getting a better understanding of what's happening with this alleged pandemic and coming up with some other response? It can't possibly be correct what's being done right now. But people just want to dig in and keep doing the same thing.
And as Trump had said, the cure cannot be worse than the disease itself. And we're not, when people are analyzing the numbers when it comes to like COVID deaths, which is questionable also in its own regard, but we have to consider the mental health toll, the suicide rates, the unemployment rates. We're taking away people's small businesses. Most of the small businesses aren't going to be able to be recovering from this.
No, they never will. I mean, they certainly will not. I know a number of different small business owners who, you know, talk about mental health, right? It seems like this esoteric, like, well, you know, there'll be numbers on that somewhere, someone's having some mental health problem. But you've experienced this. You walk out of your apartment and you walk on the streets of Manhattan, and it is almost guaranteed, if you're not wearing a mask, you're going to have some kind of confrontation.
Yes.
People will say something to you. I mean, they're definitely going to make weird eyes and make faces at you and scoff at you. And people even think that they should tell you what to do. Now, I mean, you know, these are people.
Because they're morally superior.
They're morally superior, right? And they're riding their bikes on the sidewalk. They're crapping with their dogs on the sidewalk. They're smoking cigarettes in the bank teller machine and on the subway platform. They're doing all kinds of things that there are actually laws against that are clearly harmful to other people. But they want to come over. This is the best. I've had so many people engage me in conversation to tell me to wear a mask, ostensibly because they're afraid that whatever is coming out of my mouth is going to make them sick. The best strategy is just let me walk by.
Walk away.
Yeah, now they've got me talking to them, yelling. And you know, when you go to these mostly peaceful protests, people are taking that mask off to yell at you and talk to you. And the other thing that people need to remember is that the mask, when you see people working in these biolabs that are testing out viruses, they're wearing a big inflated suit, which is inflated so that they'll know instantly if there's a pinhole in it. The thing is underground with negative pressure to make sure air can't escape with viruses in it. There are so many high technology precautions being taken to prevent these viruses from getting out. The notion that a piece of paper over your face will do anything is so far beyond absurd. I'm almost at my wit's end talking about it. Now, when I am forced to put the mask on, I've had to appear in court and things like that, and now it's becoming more difficult to get food deliveries in New York City. Sometimes Whole Foods, or that's the supermarket near me in my neighborhood, they say, oh, no more deliveries today, you can get it 4 o'clock tomorrow. So if you need something to eat, you got to go into the supermarket, you got to put on the mask. Even when I have it on, just normal breathing, I see air coming out of it because my glasses fog up. So you're wearing the mask, whatever it is that they want to keep in. You know, no one's walking around wearing a bunny suit. It's not like, you know, everybody's going into outer space. So the virus is going everywhere anyway. And by the way, for our whole entire lives, for the thousands and thousands of years that humans have existed on this planet, viruses have been everywhere all around us. There are many doctors who have made the argument that by wearing this mask, by isolating yourself from people, by not shaking hands, by not riding on public transport, you're limiting your exposure to the types of things that normally keep your immune system strong. I mean, if you've ever had an injury,
go play in the sandbox.
I mean, I don't know if you've ever broken an arm or a leg, but when you have a cast on, even for 6 weeks, you take it off, you can't move that limb in the same way that you could. You got to go to physical therapy or to the gym and work it out. In some cases, it never fully recovers. So what is a year of isolating your immune system from its normal interactions with pathogens? What is that going to do to people's health? Not to mention, in March, Deborah Birx, the CDC or NIH, whatever the hell she's with, the doctor who was part of the coronavirus task force, she said that the CDC is no longer going to report influenza infections. And if you look at the data coming from the CDC, you'll see that in March, it just stops. There's a regular chart of it going up, going down, and then it stops.
Oh, like the CNN death toll ticker suddenly stopped on January 20th?
I didn't know that. Wow, did it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because you remember on CNN, they have the death toll ticker, and they put the deaths of the entire world, so it makes the number look very big, even though if CNN is a US media site. But January 20th, after Inauguration Day, that death toll ticker all of a sudden isn't there.
It's just so distressing to me that people aren't making these observations and aren't looking at these things. They're just seizing on whatever statement is coming from Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer or President Dumb Joe or anybody on any of these networks, Anderson Cooper and all that kind of thing. People just seize on those statements. They think they're true. What we're dealing with is people who understand psychology have set this up such that, we're gonna have a congressional hearing, or we're gonna have a court case, or we're gonna issue an indictment or a conviction or whatever it is they did with Brandon, and you get this thing on a DOJ piece of paper. It says X, Y, and Z, and now it's very easy for them to write that piece of paper. It's gonna probably take the next 5 years of Brandon's life, even if he gets a successful outcome from this. This is devastating. And they do that kind of thing all the time. They put out statements, this or that Las Vegas shooting. Stephen Paddock did the shooting. What's the motive? We don't know. Where's the ballistics evidence on any of the bullets from the guns that match the bullets to the gun? We don't have that. How come the window was not broken at 10:30 as shown by body camera footage released a year after the event, but you're saying he shot out of the window? Don't ask me that question. You know, they just put out these statements, and then when you want to deal with evidence, well, you're a conspiracy theorist. Why would you look at evidence?
Why would you look at the facts?
Yeah. And then, you know, that evidence, you know, it hasn't been certified by the law enforcement. It's
anytime I make a comment, people are like, where's your source? But then anytime they speak about it, they don't need to cite their sources. And here's the thing, I always tell people when you ask me to cite my source, listen, I've done my research, I'm not handing you my homework. You do your own research, you do your own homework. Because like if I'm gonna do all of this work and just hand it over to you, and then you're probably not going to even read it, because the point of a discourse and a debate is actually to be changing people's minds, but people aren't willing to have that discourse and debate to actually change their minds these days, because we're seeing how people are so conditioned and triggered for anger. So when people see that you're not wearing a mask, and they have to literally go out of their way across the street then to admonish you for not wearing a mask, when that's actually counter to the whole concept of if you're going to be social distancing or protecting yourself from this virus, then why are you coming over and engaging with me out of your anger for it? So there's the psychology that comes with the mask, and I believe the moral superiority now, because so when I analyze people's anger, it's the justification of anger on the left, because the ideology is seen as morally superior to the right. And so you have expressions and verbal expressions of anger is admonished if it's a right ideology, because the right ideology is considered to be bad ideology, versus on the left it's good ideology. So it not even if it's expressions of anger but actual physical violence, then it seems to be celebrated, and that's what we're seeing.
You're right. I mean, there's something going on that's I'm not sure I fully understand it, and you know, the left-right kind of paradigm is part of it, but I don't know that it even necessarily holds anymore, because we see, you know, Joe Biden is a Democrat, that's supposed to be the left, but yet he's already putting more troops into Syria, so that's supposed to be a right-wing kind of war hawk kind of a position. So I don't know that these...
Yeah, ISIS is suddenly back.
Right. So, you know, there's all kinds of things going on that I don't know fit necessarily the traditional understanding of what is on the left and what is on the right, but you know, I can't fully understand it, but you're right, this anger, it goes beyond anger even, because think about this. To begin a conflict with someone on the street of New York City, that poses a substantial risk. And there have been multiple individuals who are, you know, women in their 50s, 60s, 70s even, who will approach me, I'm a man in his 40s, just that context, man in the 40s, woman in the 70s, the man poses a physical threat to the woman in most cases. So the notion that a 70-year-old woman would provoke a conflict with a stranger much younger and stronger than them, that is so bizarre, because it goes against common sense and this sense of self-preservation. Most thinking people out in the street on New York City, older people, are not thinking, where can I find someone 30 years younger than me to start a fight with? They just don't do that. So they've been so convinced that this virus is an important threat to their very life that they're willing to take that risk. It's interesting to examine. I don't have the answer for why that is, but you said anger, and you're right, it is manifesting itself as anger, but I believe it's an internal conflict that people have. Because a lot of the things that I'm saying, you and I could sit here and talk about statistics and this and that, and people will say, well, what's your source? I looked into the investigation, and Robert Mueller found that 19 guys who could barely fly Cessnas crashed these planes, and that was the finding in the investigation, so you're wrong. But when we say something like, hey, if a doctor told you to chop off your leg because you had a blister on your toe, and then the second doctor told you to put cream on the blister, and after a year your whole foot was inflamed and it was getting worse, these are logical problems that people can work through in their own minds and say, wait a minute, that's true. Why would the governor of New York pass an executive order disallowing a licensed pharmacist from prescribing you a medication that your licensed doctor said, yes, you should take this, particularly when that medication has been in use for more than 65 years, has been prescribed to millions of people around the world. Its efficacy and safety are very well understood. It's tolerated by a wide range of age groups and all kinds of different people. Why would they make it illegal for a pharmacist to give you that, where, you know, only a year ago, if you were going to Africa, we're talking about hydroxychloroquine, of course. If you were going to Africa and you called your doctor and said, hey, I'm going to whatever in Africa, they'd prescribe that to you. You'd go to CVS and they'd give it to you. Now, no. The other thing that's strange about
You
it.
gotta follow the money.
Well, exactly. But the other thing I want people who are watching, who are skeptical of what we're saying, to think about is, there's a law that was passed in 2017, a federal law called the right to try.
Yeah.
Where if somebody has cancer or some kind of deadly disease, and there's an experimental treatment that hasn't been approved for use by the FDA, this right to try law gives that individual the right to try something that hasn't been approved on the basis of the notion that they're gonna die. So what's the worst outcome they could possibly have from this untested thing? Even with that law in place, and even though hydroxychloroquine is not experimental, you still were not allowed to get it. That's one set of circumstances. And the same governor, in the same state, in the same time frame, there are bills up there in the New York State Senate that want to mandate that you take this untested vaccine that doesn't even comport to the CDC's definition of what a vaccine is, and they say they don't know if it's going to prevent you from getting it, from getting COVID. They don't know if it's going to prevent you from spreading COVID. When a doctor tells you those things, or an engineer tells you those things, or a lawyer or somebody like that, that means the outcome is unknown. That means we don't know what might happen. So on the one hand, they don't want you to be able to exercise your right to try. They don't want pharmacists to be able to fill prescriptions for approved medications, but they want to force people to take this untested vaccine. It's not just about following the money. There's something. It's control of the population. They don't want you getting on an airplane. They don't want you entering this country. We could be dangerously close to a world where you can't even have a bank account if you won't get this vaccine, because you're a conspiracy theorist, you're a domestic terrorist, you're a Donald Trump supporter, you're a racist, you're a this, that.
PayPal is not allowing, for those who are charged for the Capitol riots, they've shut down the PayPal accounts for accepting donations for several of the people who were charged at the Capitol riots.
But now, see, that seems fundamentally wrong, because being charged for something, you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. And where are these private businesses coming along? How many people are convicted felons who have raped people or murdered people or robbed banks or committed embezzlement or fraud of some kind, felonies of all kinds, who have PayPal accounts? And why is PayPal selecting this one particular thing before anyone has actually been convicted of these crimes? They've been accused of these crimes. There could be, there could be a lawyer representing any of these people who raises some point about the activities of the U.S. Capitol Police, where if the police step out of the way and flag you to come this way, that's an order from the police. And if you're following orders from the police, how can they then charge you with a crime? So it's a very strange circumstance. The other thing I want to talk about with the Capitol Police, it's a very unique police force in the United States. Their jurisdiction is a very tight area around the Capitol building. So the Capitol grounds and members of Congress, wherever they travel in the United States and around the world, are protected by the U.S. Capitol Police. They're kind of like a mini FBI in that regard, that they have jurisdiction outside of a municipality the way a normal police force would. You leave New York City, the NYPD really has no jurisdiction over you other than to extradite you back here. So the U.S. Capitol Police, unlike other police forces, they're not controlled by a mayor. Mayor de Blasio ultimately gives the orders to the police commissioner and tells them things like stand down and don't protect defenseless women when they're getting attacked by mobs. But the person who controls the U.S. Capitol Police is the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Now, I've seen these videos where they're waving people in and they're letting people in. I don't know that we've gotten a very good explanation as to why that was happening. I don't know why, when everybody knew January 6th was going to be a huge protest, demonstration, rally, whatever you
I heard
want.
there was only 50 Capitol Police that were present at that time.
Why would you do
and
that?
And now we had like what, over 10,000 National Guard
20,000.
present. 20,000 National Guards present.
But even if the U.S. Capitol Police had said, hey, you know what, we're expecting a big demonstration, and there were Twitter accounts talking about things going on at the Capitol, Facebook accounts talking about things going on. They shut down Parler because they're saying that was used to plan these sort of things. They're not doing that to Facebook, they're not doing that to Twitter. But if they say they had no idea that there was going to be a huge congregation of people and on the day that this very important thing was happening at the Capitol, and they could not anticipate a need for increased security, then they're completely stupid. But in my view, what should have been done is the U.S. Capitol Police should have said, hey, you know what, our entire force is 2,300 people. Let's communicate with and cooperate with DC Metro Police. That's the regular municipal police force. Let's get, I'm not a security expert. 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 riot police. Let's set up a perimeter. Let's put a big yellow tape around. Because you know what, where I was, and we were, like I said, we were standing on a sidewalk. So is that sidewalk Capitol grounds?
Yeah.
Is that now?
I was on the sidewalk too.
Right? So if they could have had a 4'2" child in a police uniform saying, gentlemen, you can't enter here, and I wouldn't have entered. But it was unclear, where do the Capitol grounds begin? Where do they end? What are they, how far will they take that? So it was a major failure by the U.S. Capitol Police to even allow, even in the time that I was standing there, when I arrived there, I said, hey, this is a pretty big crowd. And then I turned around and I was like, wow, that's more people than I've ever seen in my entire life.
Same here.
So I said, let me just back up from this a little bit. And we were looking at it. I was with Charles Ortel, as a lot of people have seen. And then we started seeing people climbing on the fixtures. And I said to myself, it's one thing to come over here and stand on the sidewalk, stand on the lawn, that kind of thing. But climbing on the fixtures, climbing on the bleachers, tearing, breaking things, destroying property, pulling up fence posts, this is obviously not something that you're supposed to be doing, obviously not peaceful. And every single Trump event that I've been to, everybody that I've seen and interacted with is very conscious of this notion that we want to present an image that is the total opposite of this destruction and chaos and violence and destroying property and all that.
That's been my same experience also attending multiple Trump rallies.
Yeah.
And it was something that I was even conscious of when I was being attacked at Madison Square Park, because even though I had a mob of 20, 30 on me, I knew the instant that I would even punch back in self-defense, which completely would have been in my right, the narrative would have been, then the context that would have been taken for that clip would have been Trump supporter attacks
punches somebody, right.
attacks innocent BLM protester.
Right.
And that's what would have ended up then making into like corporate media.
Right. Well, that's what they want. I don't know, I was surprised the way they behaved towards you. For me, they want an older, I'm old enough to be old, but young enough for some 20-year-old kid to square off and punch me in the face and think that's a fair fight. Well, whatever, if that's what they want to do. But they want that video of the guy getting his head kicked in and then, Twitter comments of, F around and find out and that kind of thing. And that's fun for people to have these beat down videos. And we don't know what happens to these people. There was a guy on Sunday, got off a bus and was attacked by a dozen people. They stripped him of all his clothes, took his underwear.
Oh my God.
It was in the 20s. It was freezing. You could die. Plus getting kicked in the head on the sidewalk, you could die. Everybody thinks this is some fun joke, but one wrong kick, somebody gets a brain bleed, you could go blind, you could lose motor coordination. This is going to affect these people's lives for the rest of their lives. And meanwhile, we've got Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, suing the NYPD for being too violent with the rioters who destroyed New York City, made it a place that is not conducive to doing business, shut down 40% of the restaurants, terrorized the people who are living here so that the tax base is moving out. Who would want to be here in New York City? I was born here, I've lived here my whole entire life. I've historically loved New York City, and it's become so unpleasant, Tara, even to be in my own apartment building, to know that all these people around think that because we don't want to listen to obviously illogical science, that somehow there's something wrong with us.
Yeah. We're no longer living in a free society. A
Correct.
free society is when you can have civil discourse and any issues are worked out through talking. But that's not what we're seeing going on, and that's why people are getting into your face and taking it upon themselves to almost be like these social justice warriors.
Yes, absolutely.
And virtue signaling, because I mean these are buzzwords, yeah, but when there's actually no substance behind the action that's being done, but it's just to make you look good or like fake the applause to it, no thanks.
Yeah.
And if you disagree with that, then you're bad.
Well, right. And the thing is, we've got to be very careful now because we see the baby steps that are moving towards, you hear this language, you got to be very cautious. Like, when September 11th happened, there's this individual named Anthony Schaefer, and he's become well known for being the principal spokesperson, I should say, for something called Able Danger, which was supposed to be some kind of program, military intelligence program, CIA or something like that, that was hunting for terrorists. And he's appeared on Fox News many times talking about how they knew about these 9/11 guys, but there wasn't enough communication between the agencies, and we need more surveillance so we can find these. And everyone's like, yeah. That trauma of the World Trade Center exploding and seeing that, it's what's happening to us right now is a remarkably sophisticated evolution of that. There was a whoever you think caused those planes to hit those buildings, and I know there's a lot of people who think no planes hit the buildings. They think it was visual effects or holograms. Those people know nothing about holography or visual effects. But this notion, this image, this sensation that everyone had when those buildings were destroyed, when planes hit, you're thinking, oh my God, I've been in that building. Oh my God, this is my neighborhood. I've been to New York. I've been on a plane. That could have been me. I have friends who work in that building. I could picture myself in a plane. Most people are horrified by the notion of a plane crash. Riding on a plane is one of the most frightening things that many people, if you think about it, it's one of those bizarre things that we do. You get in a tube and go 500 miles an hour somewhere, and you're like, oh, it's no big deal. But it touched every single person alive in the world on the day that it happened, and it made you afraid.
Right.
Because no matter how tough and strong you are, when you're sitting in your office, when you're sitting in your house, when you're sitting on your airplane, and it crashes into that building and explodes, you feel your mortality. So they were able to really play on people's emotions in the wake of 9/11 by saying, well, now we need to go destroy this country because they're terrorists, and this country because they're terrorists, and we need to listen to your phone calls and your email, and if this person makes a terroristic threat, then the Constitution is out the window.
They use that fear to then take away the liberties.
Correct.
And that's something that's happening right now.
It's happened. It's already happened. If you say, I don't believe that a piece of paper, even if there is this deadly contagion that you're describing, I don't think that piece of paper is going to do anything. And then here's all this scientific data about the use of masks that says that it could be harmful, which, by the way, there is a lot. And the other thing I meant to say about masks is they were designed to be used by doctors who put them on in a sterile environment, take it off, don't ever use it again. They're not going into the supermarket and taking it off, putting it on, going outside, dropping it on the street, putting it back on, throwing it on the counter, putting it on the next day, touching it with their dirty hands, sneezing into it. The masks are totally ineffective, but what they're doing is they're just getting people so frightened by this notion that, now all of us are in a situation where you've got to be very careful. Anyone in my apartment building who decides they don't like me can apparently make this complaint, or whether I'm doing it or not.
And now it's just taken to the level that an accusation
is sufficient to get you a monetary fine, or to get a phone call made to the police. Where does that happen? Where the police come knock on the door, hey, we've gotten 10 complaints from this apartment building. Well, from who? We don't know. What evidence? We don't know. Doesn't matter.
When I was there at the MLK Day riots that went from Barclays Center across Brooklyn Bridge onto into City Hall from Manhattan, they several of the BLM protesters that had recognized me from my stream were then accusing me of being inside of the Capitol, and they were going to the police telling them, like,
Right.
arrest her, she's wanted by the FBI, she was inside of the Capitol. And so they were trying to get me arrested from that. And you know, it is scary to think that that would be enough of an accusation.
Maybe they would.
To then actually do that.
Yeah.
And they were taking my stuff that I had posted on Twitter, that it doesn't show me inside the Capitol because I didn't go inside of the Capitol, but they were showing that I was present at the
Right.
Capitol, and
they were using that as evidence.
Using that as evidence. Like,
This
see, she
is
was
how
at
they
the
work.
Capitol. I'm like, yes, I was
This
in
is
DC. I'm on
how
the
they
sidewalk
work.
there. But they were taking they were using my Twitter, going up to the NYPD and saying, arrest her, she's wanted by the FBI and everything. The NYPD reacted by just shaking their head, and one said to me, I don't believe him. So
Right. Well, that's just it. I mean, if
Yeah.
the FBI called the NYPD,
Yeah,
then they would
exactly.
listen. But some dope on the street, they're not listening to. But you're
Mm-hmm.
right. I mean, who knows? What if it wasn't the NYPD?
Mm-hmm.
What if you worked for a company and they called the company and they said, "Look, we don't even want to hear your story. The fact that you were there,
Yes.
you're fired." I've got people who
that's how cancel culture is working.
Exactly. And that's what they want to do. They want to cancel anybody. I mean, this is the behavior of cowards. They show up in masks. They don't want their faces to be recorded. They don't want to stand by what they do. They want to cover you in lies. They want to cover what they do in lies. They've got a story that they're sticking to, irrespective of what the facts are. And they're just going to overwhelm with a louder bullhorn, with a bigger crowd, with pushing you off of your position, and whatever
That's
you
terrorism
say.
and intimidation.
Absolutely.
And that's why these groups are the actual domestic terrorist organizations that we see in operating here, just the gangs of New York, gangs
Now,
of Portland.
along those lines, Tara, I really have to say, in retrospect, we have to acknowledge the disappointments and failures of Donald Trump. I was very enthusiastic about the notion of him as president, not because of him, but because of what he represented. And I think that any honest person needs to acknowledge that Donald Trump is a flawed man. Every one of us are flawed. He did and said a lot of things that I wish he hadn't, but and many people will disagree with this. There are people who watch Crowdsource the Truth who tell me Trump was in on it all along. Maybe, I don't know. I still want to run my life on the premise of giving people the benefit of the doubt until that doubt has run out, and presuming that people are innocent until they're proven guilty. Because what I see in the case of Donald Trump, it does seem like he was trying to drain the swamp. He might not have made all the right decisions in doing that, and definitely the swamp does not want to be drained. There are things that I knew that seemed so obvious to me that he either didn't know or was not in a position to do anything about. But William Barr, for example, was a terrible choice. William Barr, at his own confirmation hearing, acknowledged that he was outside counsel to the CIA. He was a lawyer for the CIA, and he was pivotal in getting pardons for many of the criminals who were involved in Iran-Contra, including, well, no, I shouldn't say including, but there is a picture that I've seen that shows William Barr in the 1980s standing with President Dumb Joe, and what's his name? Leahy, the guy who they're now saying is going to preside over the impeachment hearing because Justice Roberts doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
Now that's very strange that he doesn't want to do it. I think it's because he recognizes it's an unconstitutional process and a mess.
Right. So we're not even abiding by our own processes that are in place.
That's right. And Adam Schiff did
Why?
that with the first impeachment because these guys know that it's about political momentum. It's not about what's right. It's not about the law. It's about if Adam Schiff can get on TV, and this is what the people who own the TV stations, and this is what the people who are influential in media want, and that's a small group of people. And by the way, if you're talking about a deep state that's going to control, a government, controlling the media is the first thing that you want to do so that you can control what everybody else perceives to be true. So, Adam Schiff and all these guys, they can change the rules, they can flout the Constitution. Laura Loomer, who you probably know, recently tried to purchase a gun and they said you're on some FBI list.
Yeah, she's not guilty of anything.
She hasn't been charged with a crime. She hasn't been found to be a felon. She's, they've just decided you can't
They're
have
taking
this
her rights
constitutional right. Correct. So what happens when they decide, well, we know you like the Constitution, but we don't want you to have freedom. We don't want you to have liberty. We don't want you to pursue happiness. We don't want you to have life. They can do whatever they want. And it's a shocking and dangerous time, Tara. I don't know what the answer is, but we're really just at the beginning of this, I think.
And I think something that everybody can relate to is the digital assassinations we're basically experiencing and censorship on social media. I got a strike on my Facebook for a old post from November 4th. I was dancing MAGA to YMCA, and so that was flagged as incitement for violence.
Wow.
And that was flagged January 7th.
Now wait a minute. So you're dancing,
MAGA.
and that's incitement to violence.
Yes. That was flagged by Facebook as incitement to violence, and that got me a 7-day ban from posting, and that happened on January 7th for a post that was made on November 4th.
Wow. And I was completely deleted from Facebook. They gave no explanation, and they said that no appeal is possible. So, again, just to enumerate my disappointments with Donald Trump, the fact that he, while he still could, didn't take action against Twitter. He said Antifa is a terrorist organization. Why didn't he, galvanize that somehow with an executive order or instructing the FBI to do anything? They don't seem to do anything. It's a failure to begin investigating. Why didn't he tell the DOJ that, Twitter is supporting Antifa by taking down the United States president and leaving people like this guy and this guy and this guy? We're going to now
seize. Organized in plain sight,
Right.
using these social media platforms, yet, even something as simple as satire that isn't incitement to violence. Another post that got censored was, Joe, I won, a meme that had been floating, so I posted that, and that was also censored for misinformation. And so they're censoring satire, but yet they won't censor actual calls for violence by Antifa groups.
Well, and also the fact that they say that statement is misinformation, well, that means that they've conducted an investigation, they've evaluated all of the evidence, and beyond any reasonable doubt, they've determined that this is the conclusion and that is wrong. But wait, they didn't do that. They just came to the determination before they looked at any of the evidence. So this is the George Orwell Ministry of Truth. They decide what a fact is, and whatever you say, if it's not in compliance with that, is getting shoved out of the public forum.
That's how they're going to be creating their echo chamber, or it's going to be mirroring what's on controlling MSM. Where do we go from here?
It's difficult to say, and it's also an unnerving situation to be in where, you and I, this is our job. We're trying to make a career out of this, trying to do something that we think will benefit people at large, that will bring people information and an understanding. As you said, when you go there and just point a camera at the event, even if you're not saying anything, you're just broadcasting that event for people to see, learn, make their own determinations if they can't be in New York. They don't want you to be able to do that.
And since I'm doing it also live stream, I'm not editing anything that's being showcased.
Right, and I do that as well. I appreciate that aspect of your work. But to have this kind of sensation that you wake up every morning and look at YouTube to see if it's been removed.
Yeah.
That's tense. That's, and I don't know.
I do that every morning too.
You've sort of just started this journey. I've been on
yeah.
this path for 4 years. I've been sued 4 times now by a group that there's a lot of evidence indicates know each other. Certainly many members of this group know each other, have interacted, and this is what they're trying to do to get me to stop. See, because they know that a lawsuit is going to occupy my time, occupy my money, gives them an opportunity to do all these kind of things. They can publish articles about all these numerous lawsuits and the allegations in the lawsuits. The next level up is what they're doing to Brandon, criminal lawfare, where, and that's why someone like you or I or Brandon Straka got to be really, really careful. You'll notice Alex Jones specifically told people, don't go in the building. Show them that we're not going to do violence. I mean, I think most people were listening to that. There's got to be a thorough examination of not only what was going on at the Capitol, but what is this QAnon and where did it come from? Who created it? Who runs it? What is its purpose? You're trying to tell me that that thing is such a threat to the government that they're going to go arrest everybody, but the NSA that tracks every phone call, every keystroke, doesn't know what it is and where it's coming from. It's supposedly somebody with this Q-level government clearance. How many people could there possibly be that have that? You're telling me for 3 years this thing has been spurting out this incredibly important information and nobody in the CIA, the DIA, the NSA, the FBI, nobody can find them? Why do we need these agencies if they can't find this? It's useless. What it's suggestive of is that they want QAnon to exist, or perhaps created it themselves. And I think that's what they did. I think QAnon is a giant dragnet to basically corral the least discerning, the most susceptible to suggestion, the most prone to following, to corral all these people and to put them in a situation, which we have now seen that situation on January 6th, to just get 250, which is what John Sullivan's brother told the FBI. John Sullivan's brother told the FBI there were 250 Antifa agents provocateurs there. And they were basically scoping that crowd all day, looking for the rowdiest, the drunkest, the highest, the most QAnon people they could possibly find. You sprinkle in an idiot in a water buffalo helmet and David Lee Roth face paint and call him a shaman. You sprinkle in a guy who magically is in an Uber commercial, but also at the front of the crowd to record the Air Force woman being shot. You sprinkle in these guys, and that's all you need. It wasn't 1% of the crowd that was there. And that crowd might have been less than 1% of America that supports Donald Trump. And it was less than 1%. It was probably 0.1% of the people that were there that actually went into the Capitol. And that was sufficient to trigger this now nationwide witch hunt for anyone who says, you should be careful too, because there's going to be people who are going to try to associate you with QAnon. That's another thing that some of these lawfare lawsuit people are doing, is they put out their own blogs where, oh, is there a link between QAnon and Jason Goodman? Or, you know, there's a guy who put out a video in which he lies and says that I was a QAnon profiteer and that I lied to people to get them to believe QAnon. The day QAnon appeared, I said, this is suspect. Why is it anonymous? Why would I trust something that's anonymous? And the longer it went on, the less I trusted it, because mostly the people who surrounded it and were promoting it. And unfortunately, Brandon Straka associated with some of those people. I tried to warn him not to. I'm not trying to say I told you so, but people like us need to be very careful, because you are proving to be very effective. And as you said, that makes you a target. And the people that are targeting us are constantly evolving their plans and their strategies, and so we've got to be very careful. We've got to be very careful, because they want to destroy you.
Yeah, even when I went on vacation actually for the last couple of days, and I was just posting instead. I was in Portland because I knew that they were following my Twitter account, and so I haven't been. So I let them look for me over in Portland, and I posted some of my old footage from when I was previously in Portland when I was there. But I'm like, they can chase around their tails looking for me over there instead.
You got to be smart like that. It's true. But I mean, when I say destroy you, it's, you know, it's not just take out your YouTube channel.
Yeah.
They want you to get arrested. You know,
Yep.
when they say, "Oh,
and that's
go
why
arrest
they
her,"
were trying to get me arrested when I was there, and then showing my Twitter and to the police, and if our society is going to be moving to just accusations, which is something that we're seeing to trend, that an accusation is enough of guilt, because you have people being fired from their jobs, their whole livelihoods canceled and taken away
Right.
over accusations.
And that's resulting in suicide in some cases. And by the way, getting arrested, what do you think would happen to you? You could be beaten up, you could be injured, you could sit in a jail cell over the weekend if it's a Friday, and they want us dead. They want to take away everything we have. They don't want us to have the ability to earn money. And they're brazen about this. They're
looking to make people into examples also,
Correct.
so that other people don't step up. Because like, for me, who am I? I'm just a regular citizen who stepped up to becoming an independent reporter, reporting on my social media channels. And with that has already the backlash that I've received. But it's not going to stop me. But if they try to keep their action, and they're going to try and suppress other people from doing the same.
Well, they're already doing it.
We need people to step up more.
They're already doing it because people look at you and say, well, gee, I was going to go buy a gimbal and start a YouTube channel, but when I see Tara getting hit with a skateboard and getting diapers shoved in her face, maybe I'll just sit here and continue to play PlayStation and order from Postmates. But that's what they're trying to do. And when they see people like Brandon Straka, they want to destroy everything that he's built over the past 4 years and discourage anyone from going down that route again. Same thing with Donald Trump. Anyone who is associated.
They can't build something that competes in a free society. Instead, they want to pull the plug out from you and destroy what you've built.
That's absolutely correct. And when you look at Joe Biden and the inauguration and the streets of Washington, D.C. filled with people from the National Guard asking where you're going, how long you'll be staying there, what your business is there. The country is lost. The United States is over. What we're trying to do now is figure out how we can restart it.
Right.
And get back to what it is supposed to be. Because we are totally off the path. And with Joe Biden in the White House, we're
He was very quick with those executive orders to be undoing.
33.
To be undoing everything that Trump's done, to re-signing things that Trump has done also, with almost everything that's COVID. When he talked about his plan.
He has no plan.
There is no plan.
There's no plan.
He said on media that he basically said it is what it is, what's going to be going on. He can't stop the trajectory. But
Right.
wait a second, didn't you promise?
Yes.
You promise that you had a plan to make things better for us? And then, so why is he re-signing things that were already in motion and in place?
My opinion, of course, is that Joe Biden is just a complete farce. Joe Biden is incapable of being president. You can see that. They're similar in age, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, but Joe Biden looks like a confused old man. Donald Trump looks like a guy who I'm surprised someone in their 70s can be that energetic. And for me, if someone knew they won something honestly, fair and square, and their opponent was proposing a third-party audit of the result, why would the honest victor resist that so strenuously?
Exactly, especially when this one's calling for unity, and what would actually bring unity would be to provide the reassurance that this was a free and fair election. And also when you have Republicans who are calling for it, and then also Democrats are questioning as well. So that's what would have brought unity. But of course, we all know what happened, and he didn't win.
Yeah.
So Jason, tell me what's next for you.
Well, I'm about to begin a nationwide road trip. I have purchased a car. My life in New York City has become really so unpleasant that I feel I have to leave. Not just my life. Life in New York City has become so unpleasant. As we've been discussing, just walking outside, you get conflicts and you get yelled at. I can't even go down to the mailbox in my apartment building now without risking a monetary fine. Unless I want to put on a mask.
That sounds like a tyrannical government to me.
It's just such an oppressive situation. It's beyond the government now. It's my neighbors. There's so many unpleasant people who cannot think for themselves to say, wait a minute, it's not like half of the occupants of the buildings have died from this thing. If I was being defiant in the face of, if 1/3 or 2/3 of the population of New York City had died from coronavirus, we'd be having a much different conversation right now. I remember when this all first happened, they were talking about 2 million people dead in the United States or in New York, or just ridiculous. You were thinking about like zombie apocalypse.
Yeah.
And in fact, when you look at past years' influenza deaths and total deaths from viral infections and pneumonia and influenza, these numbers are in many cases less.
Yeah.
And we didn't shut down the world for these H1N1 and swine flu and bird flu and Ebola. So something happened when Donald Trump went from go back to work, this is no worse than a bad flu, we've had Ebola, and then within a week he switched to war with coronavirus.
Yeah.
I don't know if that means that he's in on it so much as I feel like somebody threatened him or somebody made him realize that you are not going to drain the swamp. You're going to do what we tell you to do. And I don't know if it's possible to drain the swamp. So, I mean, as far as what's next, life is not pleasant sitting in a box all day, and I want to kind of drive around and see what's going on in other cities around the United States and ultimately find a new place to live where hopefully I can have more space and maybe some outdoor space and be able to go places and not have to wear a mask, or just kind of, I don't know, just see what the next thing is. So on Sunday, I'm going to be starting a road trip and traveling around the country and just see what I see.
I'm definitely looking forward to. I'm sure the viewers are looking forward to seeing you take on America.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're doing Ghost Town NYC. So this is now going to be Ghost Town USA, and we'll just walk around some of these other cities and see what's going on.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us at the studio today. And we look forward to seeing everything that you're going to be capturing and seeing across America with Ghost Town USA.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's wonderful to see you again, and thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank you. And everyone, you can check out Jason's work at crowdsourcethetruth.com.